Ooh, 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 ooh. Right there. Look at that right there.
Look at that head shake, man.
Oh, man. That's what we came up here for.
Okay, live in 3, 2, 1.
All right. Well, thanks for coming down, Dylan. This is great. We don't know each other overly well, but we've got to hang out at Lund's Ultimate Fish Camp before,
sure.
and
Yep.
Obviously a couple fish heads from north central Minnesota here. So before we dive into some real fishy talk, why don't you give us a little background on who you are and where you live and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I'm Dylan Maki from Grand Rapids, Minnesota, Northwoods. Been fishing for about 10, 11 years. I actually used to race motocross, sold the dirt bikes, and entered my first tournament. I think I had 3 or 4 fishing rods. You know, I was super novice at it, but loved the competition side of it, so wanted to give it a run. Had a group of guys that took me under their wing and taught me a lot of stuff, got me up to speed super fast, and just kind of taking off from there.
Well, that's cool, and you guys get to see a ton of what's happening, new trends. As you're going through the season, obviously tech has changed a lot in the walleye world from, rigging, and corks are obviously still a big deal, but fishing vertically in a lot of the clear natural lakes, like a lot of those things have changed. So how are you guys adapting to clear water, better pressure, taking advantage of technology to get you guys on fish?
Yeah, for sure. Spending a lot of time casting at fish that are no closer than 30 to 40 feet from the boat. If you're running around with LiveScope, trying to stay as far away from them as you can, but obviously still being able to effectively cast at them, right? So I'm not going to toss a 16th ounce jig on a mark that's 70 feet from the boat. But I might be able to toss a jig wrap on that fish if they're biting jig wraps. So, kind of depending on the fish's mood, how much pressure that they've come to. Some of the places we go to, you can crawl right up to them and drop a jig straight down on them. Right? If you try to do that on leech in 20 feet of water, it's not going to happen. Just so kind of depends on how much pressure the lakes really get.
Sure. And in terms of presentations, like, what's on your deck? Let's just say it's midsummer, kind of that time where, the bite is relatively consistent. What's on your deck? What are you going to?
So I've got a slip bobber rod or 2 tied up because I always seem to tangle one of them and make that a mess. So a couple slip bobber rods. I would say a 1/4 ounce jig for throwing any kind of live bait. Jig wrap in a number 7 and a number 9 ready to rock. Mm-hmm. And then the new Berkeley finishers, I've been tossing those quite a bit, having some good luck with those.
Okay. So with the slip cork setup, are you using, I know a lot of guys are using bigger bobbers with heavier weights, tungsten. Can you run through that whole rod, reel, line length, all that stuff?
For sure, yep. So I've been, for the first few years, I was using the JT 9'2" snare, which is a telescoping rod, so you can still fit it in your rod locker. But I've actually backed that down to the new 8-foot snare that he's running. It's a little more nimble. Can't cast it quite as far, but it seems to do the trick really good, and it's super good, slow action for fighting fish. But the main deal that you want to look for in a slip bobber rod is a super light action, right? If you take a stiff rod and you try to cast a slip bobber in a leech 75 feet, your leech doesn't even make it to your backswing, right? You're pitching that leech off before you get there. So a nice slow rod that you can toss in a super slow motion, you can loft it way out there. So mainly for what I'm looking for in a slip bobber rod is being able to cast something light super far without taking your bait off.
Yeah, so that's the biggest thing, I struggle with. I'm sure a lot of people do at times is getting that pitch with a slip cork, right? It is that slow. You can't have a quick acceleration through your cast. You're going to lose your bait.
Yep.
You're going to tumble. You want to slow the bait down as it's about to hit the water too, right? Just to flatten everything.
Exactly.
Flatten everything out.
You don't want it hitting the water at 70 miles an hour,
Yeah, just a car wreck. Everybody's tumbling around. Yep. Are you fishing like? Are you using tungsten jigs? Using a tungsten weight, and how much weight are you using?
Yeah, so that's depending on depth, but I would say anywhere from a 1/4 to a 3/8 tungsten sinker on it, which is obviously nice. You can see that a little better. Sink rate's a little bit faster. If you're fishing 30 feet of water and you have just a 16th ounce jig, right? You can make a sandwich by the time it gets to the depth you want it to.
Sure.
So, playing that, based on depth, 15 foot, I might only use an 1/8 ounce sinker.
Okay.
But yeah, so whatever I need to use to get down there quickly, right? Because in a tournament situation, we might pitch at 100, 150 fish throughout the day. You know, we're putting a bobber on it. If it doesn't bite in 10 seconds, I'm out of there. I'm going to the next one.
Moving really, really fast. And is it leeches like 90% of the time on a?
Yeah, leeches, sometimes chub, sometimes a crawler, just kind of get it for what the fish's mood are.
So you're fishing all different kinds of bait on a cork.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, not just leeches.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the things that it seems like everybody is just cork and leeches, cork and leeches. Obviously that works. Do you have a preference on the size of the leeches that you're
That
fishing?
depends on the lake.
Uh-huh.
That depends on the lake. On a Vermilion, it was tiny, tiny little leeches that they were going for. They didn't like the jumbos or larges, so that's dependent too. That's kind of a pre-fish figure out what size leech they like.
Yeah, and then for the leader, are you running like 18, 24? Obviously, with a longer rod, I'm assuming you can get away with a bit longer leader, or does that make it?
Yep, for sure. I would say I hate going longer than about 2 foot because those seem to tangle really bad. You know, if you start getting into 3-4 foot leaders, it starts getting a little messy. But one thing you can do is put a couple split shots every 6 to 8 inches down it. And that seems to help it from tangling, especially if you want to use a plain hook rather than a jig.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's the worst is throwing a
plain hook.
Plain hook. Yeah,
oh, they're terrible.
They are really bad. Throwing on fish. Why can't I see my bait? Why am I not getting bit? Yeah,
set up on the
leeches
surface.
on the surface. Yeah, man. So, you know, the fish, obviously, when you're slip bobber fishing, traditionally it would be like you're going to anchor up, you're going to kind of let the corks drift across, you know, a set depth. But the way you guys are fishing now, where you're seeing the fish on forward-facing sonar, targeting them, are you quickly adjusting the depth that the cork is set at, or are you setting the bait above the fish, knowing that they're willing to travel, or how do you kind of approach that quickly and be precise with that?
So the biggest tip I can give is I always when I go to reel up my line, I make a mental note of exactly where my jig was at. So if I just cast at a fish that was 25 foot down, my jig was probably 23 foot down. I make a mental note of that 23. So if I come back to the next fish, okay, this one's at 27. Likely want to be around 25. I know I have to move my knot 2 foot to get to where I want to be, right? So I want that first cast to be as dialed as it possibly can.
Mm-hmm. And so you're trying to get the bait pretty close to the fish. You're not trying to keep it above them, make them hunt for it. You want to.
And that's dependent on lake and fish too. Like sometimes it'll be you have to drop it below them. They'll circle it around, go down and grab it. A funny story, we were fishing a tournament on leech. We were up in 2 points, so we were fishing like 8-10 foot of water. We had our bobbers set for that. We got our unders. We needed an over, so we went into Walker Bay trying to find our over. Found one in like 22 foot. Didn't think anything about it. Casted on it. That bobber was still 8 foot down. We watched that fish turn around, swim all the way up about 16 feet, come up and grab that thing.
Isn't that amazing?
It was wild.
And that's one of the things that technology does show you, like how keen fish are, and they just, I mean, they know what's up when they're ready to eat.
Yes, exactly. And you know, if you would have caught that fish in a non-bitey mood, you might need to have it 6 inches from his nose to be able to bite it. But obviously, that thing was ready to eat.
Yeah. Slip bobbers kind of fell out of favor, it seems like, for a long time, but in the last 5 years, I mean, it's just, it's obviously a really dominant technique. Now, why don't you go through a couple of the, so you're talking 1/4 ounce jig. I'm assuming that's kind of the same thing where could be plastic, could be a crawler, could be
Could be a leech.
Could be a leech. Yep.
And you know, as you get a little bit later in the year, those fish's metabolism start to be a little bit more crazy. They stop biting, in my opinion. They stop biting bobbers as good as they did earlier in the year, right? So to me, I can put that jig on them. I can start jigging it. I can start reeling it away from them. I can start getting it up further, make them actually chase it a little bit to want it. Mm-hmm. So in my opinion, as you get later in the year, the slip bobbers kind of start to taper off just a little bit.
What time of year is that, kind of right after the mayfly hatch, or is that
for sure? Water temps around 70, 72 once once the fish's metabolism starts getting crazy.
Yep. And then are you fishing a lot of plastics, or is that a crawler bite, or both?
Both, but a lot of plastics too, a lot of zoom stuff, just like split tail that you can get real shaky with. Mm-hmm. I haven't had a whole lot of luck using paddle tails. My favorite paddle tail is that Kitech Easy Shiner.
Mm-hmm, that's a beauty. Yeah.
I love that Kitech, but I don't know what the difference is with action, if you have to go too fast with those or what, but I have more luck with like a split tail.
Sure. Yeah, I know a lot of guys like that split tail, and you can get so technical with jigs and stuff where you get like a 60-degree line tie and you can get more rock out of the bait, and that definitely seems to be so much of that. It's not like a jig is a jig and a plastic's a plastic. Like there is a lot of subtlety involved in what that jig and plastic, a seemingly simple presentation.
Yes, big time nuances. Just like your slip bobber. You know, how much did we learn about how to make that rig perfect, right? When we first started throwing slip bobbers, it just had a 1/4 ounce jig on it, no weights, no nothing, and you bombed it. So yeah, just a lot of nuances.
And then I didn't really talk about line on this. Are you fishing braid most of the time with?
No, I'm all mono.
Really?
Hate braid.
Wow, that's pretty. I mean, you don't hear that too often,
No,
right?
you don't.
So okay, so
No, you
like,
don't.
do tell.
So I think, especially in the slip bobber world, I think those fish can see that braid from a mile away. You know, when you're fishing pressured fish, tournament style, people have been pre-fishing this lake for a week, 2 weeks. You know, so the lake's been getting a lot of fish. I think those fish can see that braid from a mile away. When you're talking your normal jigs and stuff, I feel like unless it's a crazy bite fish or clobber and stuff, it doesn't matter. But when it starts getting tough, I feel like they can feel that braid as soon as they catch onto it.
Really? No kidding. And so what pound mono are you using?
6 to 8.
6 to 8 most of the time.
Super light.
It's pretty crazy that I do hear more and more people coming back to mono. I always have it set up for some jig fishing situations, and I've seen it jigging wrap fishing a number of times. Whatever it does to those baits, it's different, and maybe it's something they can see too. But I'm often still, when I'm fishing braid, I'm using a high vis mono, like a really bright colored mono.
Sure.
But you're definitely going clear
mono.
Yeah.
Yep. And I do use braid here and there for jig wraps. I'm not all mono for that. But one thing I noticed on Leech a couple years ago, we were snap jigging some shiners in about, 14 foot, something like that. And when you were snap jigging that mono, because it floats, when you would rip it, that jig would go straight in the air before it fall back down. When you did that on braid, it would come out at a 45-degree angle and then fall down. So it's just an action difference at times, rather than they can see it. You know, everything just acts so much different.
Yeah, those are just the subtleties that a guy like you who spends a ton of time on the water picks up on, that you might, whatever, line is line, and
exactly,
you know what I mean, and
exactly.
And mono behaves a lot different than fluorocarbon does, and so does braid.
Time.
So yeah,
big time.
As we're talking about leech just gets so much pressure. It's a wonderful fishery, but it's changed. Like how are you approaching it?
Once you know that there's fish in an area, just get back and pitch your jig and minnow. Get it away from the boat, pitch it 40, 50, 60 foot away and do your jigging. The days of getting a nice drift line going and drifting over them, it just doesn't work as well anymore. Those fish are too spooky. The water's too clear. They feel that boat coming. And even you don't even have to have LiveScope to fish out there. Obviously, it makes your life way easier. But if you don't have that technology, it's not the end of the world. Maybe you could use your side imaging to find a flat that's holding them or something like that, point whatever.
Yeah, and the other thing I've noticed out there too, maybe you've seen this as well, but like I fish a lot of times on the southeast side of the lake, and years ago you could just go fish the deep rocks out there and catch walleyes like crazy, and that bite definitely seems to have shifted a lot more. It doesn't seem like the numbers of fish are using those deep rocks. There's a lot of smallmouth.
There's a ton of smallmouth
down there, So it seems like they may have displaced the walleyes, where you're looking, now you're spending more time portage, sucker, up towards, whatever, goose, and all that stuff. So more north and into the west.
Yeah, it does seem like there's a shift for sure of a lot more shallow fish that have happened out there in that 6 to 8 foot range. Where everything maybe at that time of year was 12 to 14. It still seems like a lot of those fish are hanging out shallow.
Let's talk about we're still talking about some techniques. The jigging wrap, obviously an amazing bait. There's a number of different ways you can fish it, but how it's fished often is just that reaction bite where you're crashing it into the bottom, really making it hunt, contacting bottom. How are you fishing it for suspended fish?
A lot smaller, little nuanced pops like that, just almost within your wrist rather than your whole forearm, doing those huge bottom jumps like we always used to do. A lot more. And almost once you pop it, you can almost kind of let it swing back towards the boat, and that's when we're getting a lot of those bites like that.
So when you're popping it, are you managing the slack on the fall, or are you letting it free? Are you feeding it some slack to make it hunt a little bit more?
A little bit, but catching it on its way back down, rather than just a fast stop where your line gets tight again. Kind of a pop and then trying to catch it and slow it back down with your hand.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's
Hard to do in the wind, boat control and everything. So it takes a little bit to get dialed, but
Yeah, for sure. Well, we're talking about wind and some of the big waters that you fish. What are you running for a boat to be out in all these?
yeah. So I'm running. I got a new one for this year. My Lund 219 glass with the new V10 400. That thing is a rocket ship.
Yeah, that's a sweet boat, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I fished out of that boat a number of times. The deck.
It's huge.
It's awesome if you're a caster, but then you can modify the back too, where you've got
For sure.
tons of room and
For sure. Yeah, like before when in our rigging days, I never would keep the removable pods in the rear. But now when I'm up front all the time, I keep those pods in for that's where I store my tackle for the day is in those pods.
yeah, and you can fit a lot of gear in that
Yeah,
thing.
you can, for sure.
So, how are you? So, give me an idea of then. You've got obviously the 219 with the 400, so you can rip around. But buying a boat today isn't like, oh, you just buy it. But now you need to add on your trolling motor. You need all these, you're going to put all these screens on a boat like that. And then you need power for all of those things. So can you walk through your electronic setup, trolling motor setup, and then how you're powering all this?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the business end up front, I've got the Minn Kota Ultrex Quest, which is an absolute beast. The new Quest is unreal. I think my boat goes like 4 miles an hour with that on it. It's wild. So that kind of power is huge to have when you're trying to nose into big waves, right? Mm-hmm. So that's huge for that. And I'm running the 236 volt amped outdoors batteries.
Okay.
Those are running all day. I run my trolling motor. I don't think it's ever came off 100%. It's always on full throttle. So
You're just ripping.
absolutely as fast as that thing will go. Then for my graphs, I'm running a Garmin 8616 up front, and then a Garmin 8612 and a Humminbird Explorer 12 on the dash. I run those off the Amped Outdoors 12 volt 160 amp hour. So those will power my LiveScope box as well. In the rear of the boat, I run the two 10-foot Minn Kota Raptors, which I've bought an adapter kit for to run the power pole drift paddles. So if I'm fishing big water in like Erie, something like that, I put those poles halfway down and run the paddles, and I'll actually drift with the wind once I get into some fish.
And so you can really slow down with that.
Yeah.
It helps a ton.
Yeah, it was 3-4 footers out there. I mean, nothing super crazy, but I had those paddles down and the boat was drifting 0.5 to 0.7.
Wow, that's huge on managing speed.
And it keeps the boat facing downwind too, so you're not fighting the boat trying to turn to drift.
Sure, that's pretty cool. Now, with the electronics setup, are you running that 160? Are you running that independently, or
Yes.
Okay, and then are you using lithium for the steering pump and the outboard starting?
I'm not, nope,
Okay.
I just keep those the two deep cycles that they come with.
Okay, so you're just running lead acid, and I think that's what a lot of guys are doing
Yeah.
right now is you can obviously use lithium for
sure.
starting, but it seems like guys are having a lot better success just keeping the electronics separate, running old school lead on the.
For sure. Now, if I had an exterior sound system or something crazy that I was going to run short on power for, I might think about upgrading that, but that'll run my radio and the live wells all day and still start after an 8-hour tournament. So it's not something that I've deemed a worry yet to need more power for.
So you're running still all the boat accessories, live wells,
Off the
radio,
deep cycles.
whatever at your console is at that. Okay, so just electronics power is for that. And how many hours can you get out of a 160 with that?
So a 160, once I hooked it up and ran it through the app, I think it was tagging like 9.6 amps per hour. So that's going to get me, 17, 18 hours out of something like that. So I've got tons of battery for that.
Full day, no problem.
No
and you
problem
can turn
at
your
all.
screen brightness down if you needed to, didn't have a charge or something like that.
Or I'll sleep the graphs at the console if I'm up front fishing to save a little bit of juice there.
Oh,
too.
sure. Yeah. That's a smart way to do it.
For sure.
No doubt.
But when you get a 160 amp hour battery, you have to pay attention too, because my Minn Kota Precision is only a 10 amps per hour charger. Right. So if I do get low on that accessory battery, I know it's going to take me 16 hours to charge that, if you're fishing day after day after day. So you kind of got to pay attention to that just a little bit.
Yeah, I would say so. I run the 15 amp per bank charger.
Yep.
And one thing you definitely have to keep in mind if you're running power like this, you're going to a resort, you're going to stay somewhere, is you want to make sure, you're drawing 60 amps. So you're
Exactly.
pulling a lot of power and you need time to replace that, what you pull out of it.
Right.
And check, like plug it in, everything lights up. come back in an hour because somebody
at
else pulls into the dock, they plug in, boom, breaker's
She's out.
popped, you popped, you come in the morning and like,
Exactly.
no lights.
Bringing a generator with you is not a bad idea, you know?
It's not, yeah. I mean, the power consumption of today's boats and the electronics is unbelievable, and that's a hidden cost for a lot of people that they don't realize. It's like, okay, I want to upgrade. I'm going to get this. I'm going to get that. I'm going to get a couple more screens. I want to get a bigger screen.
Right.
And they're thinking that their 27 group dual purpose is going to be just fine to run everything. You're like, no,
For
man.
about 45 minutes, you got enough power.
Yeah, you do. Like, if you're going to invest in big screens, multiple screens in today's tech, like lithium power is like a must-have. So plan on basically buying a whole nother fish finder is what the cost is going to be just to power those units.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, and the clean power too is what's crazy. So if you, the first couple of years we had LiveScope and stuff, we'd run it off our deep cycle. We didn't know any better. You could watch that picture clarity diminish as you got down to 11 volts, 10.9 volts, you know, as it went down. So that good clean 13.6 volts is beautiful to run that the whole time.
Yep. It makes a really, really, really big difference. So
yes.
I know a lot of the musky guys and the walleye guys, they do like running Trova or Altera. Are you running the foot pedal primarily? Are you running the micro remote or
I don't even have a remote for it. I don't even know where it is. It's all foot pedal.
All foot pedal.
Yep.
And are you always fishing in the bow for the most part?
You know, that would depend. When we were out in Sharp, I did do quite a bit of spot locking and trying to pitch current seams out of the back of the boat, stuff like that. So the remote would have been nice for that to jog over here and, you know, whatever, stuff like that. So I missed it then, but you know, for the last 4 years, it's all foot pedal.
Yep. So that micro remote, I think it comes with one. You should have that. That thing is super handy. Just throw it in your console, whatever. It's like jog, you do this, that, and the other thing.
Should have it for sure.
And I just put it on. It comes with that little carabiner, just whatever. I get in the habit
on.
all the time, and it's nice. Like 90% of the time you don't use it, but then you're like,
But you know, the reasoning behind that foot pedal too is a lot of people that run poles or you know, don't run the LiveScope on the transducer. It works really good when you can sit and the fish is stationary. But as soon as that fish starts moving and you're trying to jog your spot lock, you're trying to move around, that's when it gets really tough.
It's like playing the piano.
Exactly, because you only have so many hands. So you're going to hold your rod and fish with it. You're going to turn your pole, plus you're going to run a remote, right? We don't have 3 hands. So when I can fish with 2 and run the trolling motor and LiveScope with my foot, that keeps me most efficient, especially if that fish is actually moving.
Sure. So let's just talk about that a little bit in terms of the setup. So a lot of people do have questions about how you're going to operate your forward facing. Is it better to have a pole? Is it better to have it on your trolling motor with the Altera? That's not necessary. And Ultrex for sure. But so cable steer you can, but so where do you position it? Can you move the pole in the boat? Do you have multiple transducers? What are the walleye guys doing?
I don't even have a pole in my boat. A lot of people do have a second pole just for the second angler, so they're not, just watching basically. Like me and my tournament partner, we switch off usually every couple fish or whatever we're doing. We just take turns on the trolling motor, so we each get a piece of the action, right?
Sure.
Just kind of our style and how we fish. But a lot of people do have a pole that they can put on the port or starboard side in the back. That way, if you do come into a situation like maybe you're fishing unders, there's a school laying there, you can spot lock and sit and fish them for a while.
Sure.
So there is or if you're on a river, you're fishing a wing dam, obviously you're not going to sit there on the downstream side of it with your Ultrex looking at it. You got to be on the upstream side with a pole looking back at it. So there are certain nuances that are really good to have. But boat control with it on the Ultrex, I think, is the biggest learning curve to come around when you have it on it, right? Like I always try to sit downwind and I try to find my trolling motor speed for the day with whatever the wind is. So that might be 30% power, that might be 70% power. Now what I mean by that is I like to get directly downwind of the fish and I like to hold constant on the throttle. So if I don't have enough throttle on it, I'm going to lose ground on the fish. If I have too much throttle, I'm going to go forward, spook the fish. So I try to get in that 50, 60 foot range and just hold on it. Right. So some people will go up and try to spot lock, but then your motor's moving, you can't see it.
Sure.
Rather than leaving it at 100% and going at the fish, drifting back, at the fish, drifting back. I try to get that constant speed where I can hold on it.
That's cool. So you're using, rather than using the spot lock feature, you're using the constant button.
Yeah, using the old school spot lock.
Yeah, right. And just you're positioning perfectly downwind. So you're spotting the fish.
Yep.
You're not trying to make a cast at some weird angle where you're drifting
Exactly.
and the boat's losing weird position.
Exactly. So I'll take that extra time. Sometimes I do like if the wind is strong enough. So if you're going with the wind and you're just not getting much ground, or only going 1.2 because you're battling it, I do like to turn around and go with the wind, and you can haul the male. But then what I'll do once I do see that fish is I'll drive around it and reposition on the downwind side of it before I start casting at it.
That's pretty cool. When you're talking about seeing suspended fish, the other bait that obviously the bass guys destroy fish with, and obviously works amazing for walleyes, is the jerk bait too. Is that in your arsenal?
Yes, it is. I was
wanna talk
figuring
about
that question was coming.
Yeah.
Yeah, not a lot of people in the walleye world, I feel like, are throwing enough jerk baits for sure. I've got a JT rod that Joe made custom for me that I have a bait caster and all fluorocarbon on. So pitching those Mega Bass 110 plus 2s, and those have been really, really good for me in the last couple of years.
Something that's got a steep dive curve.
Exactly.
You can get down to the
I
fish
can let that
quickly.
fluoro sink a little bit, then I can get the maximum depth out of that jerk bait.
Yeah.
Because that's the problem, in my opinion, is there's not, past a certain time of year, there's not a lot of fish shallow enough that you can target with a jerk bait.
Sure. Yeah. That's obviously the big deal is they love eating them anytime you can,
It's just
they can
getting
see
it
it.
there.
Yeah. Right. Yep. It's really, really tough to do that. So
For sure.
we did a trip to Vermilion last year, and that new PXR Deep Maverick, there's the chrome perch one.
Yeah.
And it was, you get those like bites that are just, it was definitely one of those things where you could pick any lure you have in your tackle box, and there is nothing that is even on the same planet as what that is. When those walleyes get tuned into perch, and you can just get to the right depth, and it just hangs there. Like they just
Just
it's,
going
it's
nuts.
so fun. I mean, it's so fun. I mean,
It is.
People who haven't experienced walleye fishing, like jerkbait fishing and stuff, and you're thinking of walleyes nibbling on a night crawler on a rig or whatever, like they can
Get into the action.
Yeah.
I mean, you can even see them come 10 feet off the bottom. If you could be pitching a suspended mark, and one comes flying off the bottom and crushes it that you never even knew was there.
Sure.
It's those jerk baits are super fun.
Yeah. It's an amazing deal. So while we're talking about jerk baits, you're fishing it with a bait caster, and a lot of guys in the north, myself included, I do obviously fish jerk baits with bait casters, but then also fishing them with spinning equipment, braid and a fluorocarbon leader. Are you guys ever doing that?
Here and there, as long as they're shallow enough, and
Sure.
I'm not super versed in the jerk bait. I think it's only been 2 or 3 years since I even started throwing them at all. So, but yes, for sure, as long as they're shallow enough that you can get away with it.
Yeah. So, and talking about jerkbait fishing, if you do it with a spinning reel, the real secret to that is being able to pick up slack lines. So you want to fish with a bigger reel. So if you were bait casting, you'd be fishing with a higher gear ratio. If you're fishing with a spinning reel, a lot of times I'm going 3,000 and even 4,000 sizes. Do you see those trends in walleye fishing with the bigger spinning reels?
Big time, especially. So I've got a 7.6 medium light that's a super light rod, but I use that a lot for casting a 16th to an 1/8 ounce jig. But I do have a 4,000 reel on that, and I feel like I can get a lot of extra distance out of throwing that super light jig, having that bigger spool.
4,000 size. So that, like, most people would go 16th ounce jig, man. That's like 1,000 country, 750 country, not
Exactly, right?
4,000. But the line management is far superior, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and so you can cast further, you can pick up line quicker.
Much easier.
You're just not dealing with just line management issues, and the drags are better.
And the drags are way better. There's just that much more surface for those gears to work with,
Yeah. So we were talking earlier, you fish Daiwa reels. We both fish with Daiwa reels, and that MQ technology, if people aren't familiar with that, is it's pretty remarkable. So basically what this design is they've got a one-piece body. So you're getting this really rigid frame, and on the side you'll see this big, basically circle, which allows for a huge drive gear. So you've got a lot more gear contact, you're getting more durability, you're getting the same size frame. So that's one of the points that I want to make here with 3,000 or 4,000. You compare that to some of these older two-piece reels that we might have had years back. Like a 4,000 was, of course, huge. It was heavy. But you're talking fractions of an ounce in body size, nearly the same. When you're jumping to 4,000,
Yeah.
it's really there.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Yeah, the drags on those reels are crazy. It took me a little bit to get used to at the start, but you notice like on a couple of the older school reels, like your drag would just start to wear out every year. You're tightening it a little bit more and a little bit just to get that same amount of drag.
Yep.
So you can feel them wearing out.
Yeah, well, and it's just that the smoothness. Sorry to be pumping Daiwa here so much, but I'm telling you, like it's the reels are legit. I mean, they're amazing, but it's just the smoothness. You don't get that zit, zit, zit. I mean, it's just tick, 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 tick. Whatever you set it at, it's just smooth and steady, and it's never, if a fish makes a long run, it's not like it heats up and it starts getting grippy and slipping. I mean, it's just.
That can be the problem. Like on those Pecag walleyes, you can get them up to the surface and they'll figure out what's going on. They go right back to the bottom in 2 seconds, So to have that drag to be ready for that is crazy. One of my buddies was out there for the first time 5-6 years ago and hooked up to a big one. And he broke his line like 3 or 4 times. He's like, this is wild. I can't believe these fish, So to be ready for a run like that you got to have good drag.
Yep, you absolutely do. And especially when you're fishing light line. I mean, that's the other thing is you're talking fishing 6-pound a lot of times. I mean, you're hooking into 6-8 double-digit size walleyes. Like they can haul the male, and you don't want to be
on the wrong end of it.
Yeah, right. So it's worth investing in a quality reel. So I would definitely check out those MQ reels. Start basically at the Procyon and they go all the way up to Exist. So it's a little bit higher end reel, but once you get your hands on those things, it's like, oh man, this is.
And especially when they last multiple years, right? Like there's a lot of reels I used to have that were good for 1 year, maybe 2 years before they start to wear out. So I've got some Fuegos that I think are 4 or 5 years old now, and they're still just as good as they were day one.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. They just pack a ton of technology into every single one of those reels, and yeah, they last. They're smooth. They're just flat out awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Switching gears a little bit here to live bait. It's expensive now. Sometimes it's hard to get.
Yep.
So how do you manage live bait? Like how do you keep it alive? Minnows, I mean, crawlers are a mess to have around. Leeches, you forget them on the deck in a little styrofoam container. The lid blows away. They get hot. They turn the water gross. Give us a little take on your give us a take on like your bait management system.
So I've actually got a 200-gallon stainless tank that I have plumbed into my garage with the water softener and the whole works. So I usually buy 15, 20 pounds of leeches right away in the springtime when they're out. That way I can keep them in that tank all the way through August and September when they get hard to get. But it's a bummer when you go fish out of state, you can't bring them with you because you can't bring them across state lines. So it kind of comes down to, depends where the tournament is, what we're going to be looking at. Sometimes you're at the mercy of just what you can get at that time.
Yep.
So,
what about in the boat? Like, how do you keep leeches in the boat? How do you keep crawlers in the boat?
In the boat, I think it's a 7.5 angle, and I just keep that with the little bubbler on it, and I keep that for my day. So I usually bring a pound, maybe a pound and a half with me. But the beauty of that is I keep that up front with me, so next time I need a leech, it's just right at my feet. Just pull one out quick and grab it and go.
Okay, so you're not dealing with buying them by the dozen. You've got a dedicated bait cooler that a lot of people would use for minnows. You're dedicated
to leeches.
Yep. And what about crawlers? How do you manage those babies?
So crawlers, gosh, I forget the name of the box, but I found this box out on Lake Erie. So the outside of it, you pull off the whole top of it. The outside of it, you fill with ice, and then it's got an inner portion that you can fill with your bedding and your crawlers. So it's got a little flip top on it, so you can reach and grab it. So I have a little day cooler. It's about maybe 4 or 5 inches tall, maybe a foot long. A little day cooler of my crawlers.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, it's super cool. I got to make sure to find out the name of it. It's a really cool cooler.
Yeah, man, that's great. And what about, are you fishing minnows all the way through the season, or is that kind of a spring, fall, bookends of the year?
It's gonna depend. Like big minnows, red tails, creek chubs. I haven't pulled a Lindy rig with one of those in probably 4, 5, 6 years. It's been a long time for me. There's still a lot of people doing really well on that, but the days for me of pulling a Lindy rig at 0.5 waiting for a bite is just kind of went back. But yeah, a lot of minnows in the springtime, even into early summer. Sometimes you can get away with using fatheads longer than you think. So
yeah, sure.
But otherwise, not much for minnows.
Yeah, the minnows, it just seems like we were talking about like fishing on the Missouri out there, and I mean, there's times where just a minnow bite is just so
that you can't get around it.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
So
yep.
And speaking of the Missouri, It is such an incredible system, and we were talking earlier. You had the chance to fish some tournaments out in North Dakota.
Yeah.
Give us a little take on your experience with the walleye fisheries
so
out
fun. That is that's the destination fishery for sure. Anytime a tournament's out there, we're going to be loaded up, headed that way. The first tournament out there, the AIM National Championship, we fished in the Van Hook area. Tons of big fish. It was super fun. Definitely a big learning curve on where they were at, how to find them, stuff like that. So it definitely took us a few days to key in on them. But then the second tournament, we were out towards the Garrison area, so a lot more of the big basin type of fishery. A lot of the smelt chasers, finding between 20 and maybe 45, 50 foot of water. A lot of suspended big marks. Kind of that point hopping deal where you go from point to point to point. Stuff like that. So yeah, just a big fish factory is a ton of fun out there.
Yeah, that's cool. How was the wind? The wind is always a thing you got to manage out there.
It is. So the first time we were out there, the last day of pre-fish got very western out there. We kind of all went and hid from the wind that day. But luckily, there wasn't too many days of big wind.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So do you think Sakakawea fish is more like a lake? I mean, is it more river? I mean, like how do you look at it compared to a northern natural lake? Like
Yeah, for sure. I would say earlier in the spring, all those fish are running upstream. You can probably find a lot of current seams, fish it like a river. But then towards the end of spring, early summer, it fished a lot like a lake for us. Your typical inside corners on shoreline structure, stuff like that.
And it's just looking for, like you said, you're just spot hopping. Points. Like points are a big deal.
Points are a big deal, yeah, because there's not much for offshore structure like any of the humps we'd have or anything like that. It's a lot of shoreline related stuff.
Do you find that little pieces of rock or cover, or can the fish just show up be on a point because it's a point, or do you need to have certain types of bottom on those spots?
That's a good question. I would think that they would veer away from muddy bottom stuff unless there's some sort of hatch going on. But for sure, a lot of sand, rocky bottom stuff is what we keyed in on. But I kind of think like in those river systems, they're always migrating, whether it's upstream for the spawn or downstream following bait, looking for the cooler water. So I think those are just kind of pit stops that they can hit along the way. It's kind of the only piece of structure that they have, the mouths of bays, stuff like that.
Yeah, it is amazing how much those Dakota fish do move. Like,
right.
You could find a spot in north central Minnesota that's got walleyes on it the third week of June, and there'd still be walleyes on it in the end of August, where it's like, you know what I mean? You could fish a point first thing in the morning and there's nothing, and you're like, oh, the wind picked up, something changed, whatever. Maybe nothing changed. And on your way back, you're like, I just want to try that again. It's just loaded.
Yeah.
Like they're just always on the move.
And I think there's got to be just waves of fish that are just doing their thing all day long, and you're just right place, right time catching those waves. Yeah.
It's pretty cool. That Missouri River is, the size of the fish, the quality of the fishery, it is just one of those. It's an amazing place, in the landscape out there. I'm always, I just think the landscape is so
beautiful.
Cool. Yeah.
You got mule deer, whitetail, antelope. I mean, there's buffalo. Everything's running around on the shoreline, so that's super cool to see.
It is, yeah. And it's funny when you talk to people from out there, they feel like they're claustrophobic when they come visit the Northwoods where we're from and go out there. And the other thing that's crazy out there too is like, you're like, oh, I'm going to go fish that point. You're just like looking over there and you're like, oh yeah. And it's like, you're going and you're going and you're going.
20 minutes to get there.
Right. It's just like it looks small, but it's
massive.
Big.
Yeah, it's massive. Yeah, I think on day one of the second tournament out there, I think I ran like 50 miles from takeoff to the first spot and then just kind of point hop my way back. But yeah, you look at the map and you're like, oh yeah, it'll take me 10 minutes to get there. It's like, no, that's a half tank of gas.
Yeah, right. It is really, really, really big water out there for sure. So I wanted to just kind of, this is somewhat of a topic. Obviously, it's been hot in the world of angling right now, which is forward facing sonar. And so when I watch a lot of these AIM tournaments or not NWT whatever tournaments, like FFS does really seem to dominate, that technique, and Hoyer winning on Erie, compared to the board fishing. So like, what is are there discussions in the walleye world on, forward-facing sonar is the best thing ever? Is it terrible? Like, where's the conversation at in the professional walleye?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few people that are against it and stuff like that, just like anywhere else, but it's not as crazy as like the bass world, what we're seeing in that stuff going on. There's obviously people against it. So, and I mean, I see both sides of it. I understand it, but for me personally, the amount that I've learned, just not even fishing, just using LiveScope, just fish tendencies, where they're actually at in the water column. You know, for instance, you're fishing 14 feet of water. You think those fish are right on bottom. They're walleyes, right? No, they're like 3 feet under the surface sometimes. You would never guess that. So, I mean, just the nuances, the things that we've learned from it is just, that would take decades of fishing knowledge to actually figure stuff like that out. So I think it's crazy for the amount that we've learned. One of the arguments that I have for it is there's countless fish that I've casted at over the last few years that don't bite. Mm-hmm. There's days I go out and don't catch a fish, even though I've casted at 200 of them, whatever the number might be. So just because you strap it on your boat and have a fishing rod doesn't mean you're just going to go out and wreck fish.
Yeah, it doesn't. It definitely changes fishing, like fundamentally, and like what you're talking about. Like, it shows you, I mean, just unknown. You could see what was underneath your boat. I mean, obviously side imaging tells you things, but you didn't know that walleyes were 3 feet under the surface and 40 feet of water.
Absolutely.
Like, there's all these big discoveries being made with it. So I would definitely agree that it is probably the most revolutionary tool ever.
Yeah.
In terms of what you can learn. You know, on the musky side of things, like, I'm actually concerned with it for the sharpshooting side of things, and
absolutely,
and the world of a walleye compared to a muskie. They're so different. So a lot of people just take this approach. It's like, you know, the hell with forward-facing sonar, you know, make it disappear. Yep. It's like, well, you know, it does show you a lot of things, and there's probably plenty of situations where it's great, it doesn't matter. But there are situations I think that we should look at, like the sharpshooting muskie thing. It's crazy how you can see those things.
And wintertime crappies, right? That's a super volatile species that time of year. I mean, people can go wipe out a whole small lake full of crappies in a short amount of time, you know? And it comes down to ethics too. 20, 30 years ago, when the word would get out on a small little lake about crappies, everybody and their brother's there, and it goes till the bite's over, right? So, but and I agree with you on the musky side of it. If you're catching a fish 40 foot down, throwing at it, knowing it's there because of LiveScope, I mean, that does present a bit of a problem.
Yeah, it is. It's a challenge, and the technology tends to, or obviously it's proliferating. More people are getting it. More people have access to it. So we're just getting better and better access to fisheries. So I'm glad that we get to have this conversation. You get to get these takes with everybody as we start to, you know, really dive into you know, what does this mean? And it's not a simple black and white argument that it's like, you know, this is it's bad. Yeah, it's great. You know,
and it's technology too. You know, I mean, even look at when the lake maps came out for Lake Winnie or Mille Lacs, for example. I mean, people went out and just destroyed fish. That was new technology. Did that. Look at spot lock. How many people have become way better fishermen because of the use of spot lock, right? So it's technology. It's going to keep advancing. It's going to keep getting better. And 10 years from now, who knows where it's even going to be? But we have to get together as anglers and make sure that from the fisheries standpoint, everything's still going in the right direction.
Yeah, that's the big thing. I mean, as long as we've got healthy fisheries, we are going to have, at least this is my opinion, if we've got a quality resource, we're going to have participation in the resource. So make sure that we've got, you know, quality fishing is what, you know, this whole thing is about. So
for sure. And, you know, for the point of getting kids into fishing, it's a lot easier to bring a young kid fishing when they get to look at the LiveScope, right? They love it. They love looking at it, and for the amount that they can learn off of that too.
Sure. Yeah, I will never ever argue that it is. That's one of the things that is tough for me, is that a lot of people will say, well, if you use LiveScope, you know, you take people out, you don't learn anything. If a guide takes you and you use LiveScope, you don't learn anything. I would say that having used the technology a lot, like the first time I used it, I learned like more than I knew. Like you learn more with the technology than ever before. Yep. I think that the message that we're both trying to communicate here is that, of course, with this technology, we really need to be aware of what this tech can do. And seconding your point about tech has been evolving the whole time. It's just that forward facing has really
It's a big jump.
been the catalyst to elevate this conversation.
Sure.
And if you couldn't use outboards, forward-facing sonar would be a non-issue, right? You know what I mean. So, so there's got to be some balance, and I think it needs to be a really well thought out discussion on where where there might be areas of concern that we should look at, and areas that it's great, have at it, use it, learn about it, have fun with it,
Absolutely.
enjoy it. You
Yep.
know.
And ethics comes down to a lot to it too. 10 years ago, if you were going to go out on casts in the fall and wreck walleyes in 60 feet of water and keep fishing past you've caught your limit in the live well, like you're likely a lot of those fish are not going to make it, and you're not doing a good deed by doing that. So just because the LiveScope is now involved, some of that style of fishing has already taken place.
It has, yeah.
Ethics.
And the crappie thing, I think this is a good discussion, because you brought up this good point. So we live in the land of 10,000 lakes, and we've got little crappie lakes all over this part of the world that come up. That's a hot crappie lake, and in the 40 years ago, somebody was sitting in the cafe having coffee, and they told Joe that the crappies are biting out on this lake. So he drags his skid house out there with a jiggle stick and a bucket of minnows, and then the other guys in the cafe come out there, and that winter they fished the crappie fishery down. There wasn't much left because they threw everything in buckets and it's gone. So that's not like a new trend,
right?
That crappies have been fished down in these lakes. It's a species that tends to rebound quickly. But what the concern is now is that I can look at my phone and so posts that, this lake is hot right now. And a few guys can be like, it's not, you don't have to drill 200 holes and hope you find them. It's like bam, bam, bam.
Yes.
So it's the frequency in which that could happen.
Much faster.
Real concern, right?
Absolutely. Right.
Yep.
Absolutely. Much faster than just driving by a little pothole and seeing a skid house out there. So you're going to go try it as well.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it can happen in weeks rather than a couple years.
Yeah. Yeah. And that area up by you guys, this is the Grand Rapids area I'm talking to. People have been up. That is such a beautiful zone. And it's a really different part of the state where it has great quality fisheries. There's, big, still really great quality panfish up there. But if you compared the Grand Rapids area to, say, Alexandria, if you go up there and put the hammer down on, say, big bluegills, for example, like that might just be it. Like they might not come back. Where a fishery, you go western Minnesota where it's super fertile.
Yep.
Those fish they grow fast. I mean, so that's the other thing that I think is really important for this conversation is you have to understand it's a very dynamic discussion. Fisheries are everything is just so different, and
there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle when it comes to those little panfish lakes.
Yeah,
for sure. When you're talking about a little lake that's got big bluegills in it, if you fish that year class out of those big ones, a lot of times they just don't come back.
Yeah,
or it might be 10 years, it might be 15 years, just because in my opinion, I feel like they get so stunted with all the little ones. Those year classes just never go anywhere.
Yeah, they don't. That's just kind of it. You just end up with like all of our lakes around here, lots of 4 to 7 inch sunnies that
little dorks.
Yeah, nobody really cares about or wants to catch, and so
not big enough for a taco.
yeah, exactly. So where else is fishing taking you this summer, Dylan? What's on the schedule?
Like I said, it's kind of up in the air a little bit. We're heavily looking into fishing the series of the NX, or the aim to qualify for the NXT in 2026, but we just kind of obviously got the new baby coming, so I might have to take a little step back for the summer and be dad for a little while, which is great. I'm super excited for that. So, but yeah, we're kind of up in the air just a little bit.
Yeah. Well, as you know, the first year is tough, man, especially for dads.
And now we'll have 2 under 2, so. It's going to be a little wild.
You're going to have your hands full, but in a few years it'll just be awesome. Fishing buddies, and
exactly.
Yep, it'll be fantastic.
Well worth it.
Yeah, man. Well, I really appreciate the conversation, Dylan. This has just been fantastic. So, how would people get in touch with you, or how can they reach you?
Yeah, find me on Facebook, Dylan Maki. I've got an Instagram page, Dylan Maki Fishing. You can find me on either one of those.
Cool. Well, that is fantastic. And we've got, we're going to have to go check in the front office here. So we got you a cool little fresco. These are these magnetic photo tiles. We'll run up front and get you that before we go. And just can't say thank you enough. Yeah. Super cool to have a Grand Rapids boy down here who is a dialed angler. This guy is on top of what's happening in the trends of fishing, especially walleye. So great having this conversation with you. I learned lots. And if you are watching this on television, you can check out the Angling Edge Buzz online and listen to it wherever you find podcasts.